Well, hello, Andrew here again, and this is episode 102. And today we're looking just at one verse from Matthew chapter 6, again, part of the Sermon on the Mount. Matthew chapter 6, verse 24. No one can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth, or as it's more accurately being put, mammon. This time, as I've reflected on this verse, I've noticed what came next. Verse 25 starts with the word therefore. So the verse that we're considering now is antecedent to what follows. It comes before and sets the whole context of what follows. This verse is an engine that is pulling quite a lot behind it. And it's actually worth having a look at the next 15 or so verses to see what does follow. Because you can then see, we know what Jesus is wanting to say here. As one reads the section that follows, it becomes clear that we need to make a choice of who or what you're going to serve. Or as God or wealth, mammon, prosperity, money, success, whatever. As Bob Dylan aptly put it, you've got to serve somebody. The temptation is to sit with the verse and consider two earthly masters as a way of getting into the passage. I discovered that in trying to do this in 21st century Aotearoa, New Zealand, this is less than useful, well, for me anyway. We no longer live in an age where we are overtly owned or in servitude. And this really got me thinking. Though if we stood back and looked at our situation critically, we'd realise that most of us are actually wage slaves, merely surviving, living from payday to payday. We don't see it because we're distracted by the glitter of the things that we have and the dream of having those things that are still beyond our reach. It's a drug of materialism, a bit like Soma from Huxley's Brave New World, that keeps us in a constant cycle of getting and longing for more, unaware that we're spending our lives on that which ultimately doesn't matter or satisfy. By the time we've discovered this, it's often too late. Many never discover it. They imagine that life is a competition and the winner is the one who dies with the most toys. It never seems to occur to them that it doesn't matter how many toys they have, they're still dead. The pursuit of mammon, of wealth, of success, of power, each for its own sake, is an addictive drug and a massive distraction. We were created for more than this. The reality that Jesus was deadly serious about, it's God or wealth, got me focusing on that polarity. In the end, it's a simple choice. We either love the one and hate the other, or will be devoted to the one and despise the other. Sit with us for a moment. God or prosperity? If we choose God, we quickly recognize that although we may not have much else, we have that which matters most: peace and joy. A sense of serenity that none can take from us. My hunch is that it's serenity that the human heart most longs for and looks for in all the wrong places. So many of us, so many of us will trade serenity for lesser goods, if goods they can be called. Wealth and what goes with it, often power, panders to the pride, to the ego, and invites its holders to look down their nose at those who don't have it. Wealth or power. There's a lot that's been written about this, and I'm not making this up. They see themselves as deserving. It's by their hard work or their superior personal attributes or their more evolved gene pool from which they come. It's because of these things that they enjoy the status and position conferred upon them. And as I said, they deserve it. The problem is that whatever they have, it's never enough. They're never satisfied. There always seems to be someone who's better off, or doing better, or is breathing down their necks to take their place at the top of the pile. To such, the idea of letting it go for an allegiance to God is a nonsense. Why would one give up the certainty of all that one sees and holds for the uncertainty of a God that can neither be proven to even exist? They'd rather have the certainty of being rich, powerful, and probably miserable than the uncertainty of serenity. Of course, you can have a lot of mammon. You can have a love for mammon and still be poor. There is no joy in this at all, just pure misery. So hear the words of Jesus again. You will either love the one and hate the other, or cling to the one, be devoted to the one, and despise the other. Each reminds the other of something one either can't have or doesn't want. Jesus points to the reality that you can't actually have both. You can't have a love for God and a love for mammon. They don't actually occupy the same space. You've got to choose one or the other. There is no middle ground. So what then of prosperity teaching? And I do want to spend a little bit on this. It goes way back. We see it alive and well in the time of Jesus, and very much part of the inherited world of his disciples. When Jesus talks about the impossibility of a rich person entering the kingdom of God, his disciples are aghast. Who then, they ask, can be saved? Where does that come from? It's clear as one digs into it that this time that Jesus lived in, prosperity was regarded as a sign of God's favour, and therefore of personal holiness for the beholder. The wealthier you were, the more God had blessed you, and clearly they were favoured by God as deserving. Everyone wanted to be rich, not just for the benefits of being rich itself brought, but also for the moral holiness status that it conferred. So what of prosperity teaching today? I want to suggest that it ultimately assumes the same thing. The rich are deserving and the poor are undeserving, which is why there is such a push in countries like the United States to reduce taxes on the wealthy. They are the deserving rich and should not be saddled with the burden of the undeserving poor, who simply need to get off their backsides and do an honest day work for $5.15 an hour, which is currently the basic minimum wage in the States. This mind is deeply embedded in American culture, which is why if you follow their news at all, you'll see that that socialism is often the big bogey for the political right in the US. While it prides itself as being a land of opportunity, it seems to me it's a dog-eat-dog society. Now, this is an observation from me as a Star Trek fan. The fact that it has fairly consistently named the flagship of its Navy, and I'm talking about America, and will surely do it again, the USS Enterprise, tells you everything you need to know about them. It's mammon before all else, and they'll do what they need to protect it. Have the largest navy in the world, spend the most on armaments of any country by a country mile in the world, and name the flagship the USS Enterprise. It's a crowning national value. It's part of its culture, and unfortunately much of the church in America fails to see it. Much as a fish fails to see water. It's simply what its world is. They don't recognise that it could be different. And as an aside, I also note that the words "in God we trust" are printed on their paper money. Socialism in Aotearoa, New Zealand, which is where I live, and in most of the Western world, gives us universal health care, primary and secondary education, and a reasonably good one, a financial safety net for the unemployed or the sick, and a modest, very modest, retirement income. But it lets us know that if things turn really sour, there's a net there that's going to catch us. So we have the luxury of being able to choose. Does this mean that one can't love God and be rich? Of course not. I'm sure that there are many wealthy and prosperous people who love Jesus. It's a risky venture though, as Jesus indicates. It's asking us where we put our trust. And I suspect the wanting to be rich, that desire, is sneakier than we imagine. Over the past few months, Lynn and I have found ourselves able to save some money. It's been ironic, really. And I feel the tug. It's not much, just enough to get us beyond living to the next payday, the one after, and we're in trouble again. But what has appalled me is that now I find myself reluctant to spend it. I feel the tug to keep it in the bank and grow it. I imagine it gone and being back in the vulnerability of waiting for next payday. This is a new experience for me, and it's also a signal to be wary. The question in the end is, could you just walk away from it all? Just as Jesus invited the rich young ruler, sell all you have, give the proceeds to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come and follow me. I'm not suggesting we all need to do this, but I am inviting us to consider the question, would you be able to? Would I be able to? Would we be any different to the continuing to be rich young ruler and say, actually, that's just too hard? It's a good question. God bless you.